Hi there. Nice to meet you guys here. Extremely pleased to be a part of the Nordic 2024. And for you, got an interesting, quite unconventional topic of actually approaches to the modding support, approaches to the UGC implementation inside of the games. So practically, we will study in some time, I would say, some levels of depth, the all approaches from reverse engineering to in-game tools that simplifies everything for the users. So we'll talk in the details and in general about modding support or UGC support, as you may call it. So at the beginning, quickly about me, about Redico that I'm representing. Actually, I'm a modder, I'm a content creator since 2001, where I created my first mods for the Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim. Then I had an interesting project actually that I led. It was the first community multiplayer for Grand Theft Auto 5. It was called GTMP. Later on, it was open sourced. And then I took care of the Skyblivion total conversion mod for Skyrim. And ultimately, I created also a few servers that are right now being hosted around the GTA 5 community. With Julius, my co-founder, we are co-creating a technology, a platform that actually aims to democratize the modding, the UGC support for communities by adding to the game, by allowing actually developers to add inside of the game really easy in terms of the UX, in-game editors and tools for the players to just participate and create inside of the game. Here you can find me on LinkedIn via this QR code that you are seeing here. And quickly about Redicode is actually that I said that what we are doing with Julius, we actually tend to solve the number one problem in UGC that for students is extremely hard, tough, and it consumes a lot of time and effort, and that equals money to embed proper UGC or modding support in terms of the creation tooling, not hosting, but creation tooling. So let's tackle that. Let me quickly introduce you to the topic actually, because our time is limited, so I will swiftly go through this. Can you tell me what is this tool that you are seeing right now on the screen? Because it's quite comprehensive, quite advanced, and allows you to practically create multi-level user-generated content for the game that's based on. So not to mess around anymore with you, it's on Roblox Studio. It's actually an example of very detailed external editor tooling for the game. The game is Roblox, the number one UGC platform actually in the world, that earns annually billions of dollars. So in terms of the tooling, that's one approach. That's one of the most popular tools, but it's just a game as a platform. That's actually a growing trend right now. I will cover that later on. Other question, how do you think, how many mods was created just in a few days after the Starfield, the Bethesda game was premiered on 6 September of 2023? There was an early access started a week ago, and just to already answer that question, modders already created in just the early access. That wasn't for everyone. It required to obviously to pay more, and the game, it wasn't even on Game Pass then. They created already few hundred mods for the Starfield game. So that's the power of the community, if it's used properly. That's the power of the user-generated content. So let me, after the introduction and some quick question and answer, just to get more interest into this topic of the UGC, let me move you briefly through the top agenda. At the beginning, we'll make some sense of the mod classifications for you to just guide you through this topic more carefully. We will overview some most known and most on the side actually some kind of a history context here, the mods that are released for many popular games. We will talk about modding support architecture, so what you can do for your game actually for that. The fourth topic, actually, we can cover that in a QA later on because we won't have time for that right now. But we will move swiftly to final thoughts and some. We'll just sum it up at this stage. So let me move it to the first part. where we will make sense of the mod classifications and actually how do we approach this very broad topic of the UGCs. Uh, Actually, there is no single classification. We can tell you that there is even no single meaning of a word mod because some developers or some players treat it really differently. Some people are treating that as an illegal exploitation of their game in terms of the developers, while some are very happy that people are actually creating something and boosting the community appeal. Actually, we can classify mods based on two scales. The first one would be the scope of the modification, the mod, because mostly it's a short term for modification for the game. And actually, on this piece, we can tell that for less complex and actually create less effort mods, those are simple quality of life or tweaks for the game. For example, for Skyrim, that can just tweak the specific aspect of the graphic performance, for example. And then what requires more complexity and effort, people are adding new content, new map, new kind of an asset, totally new game mechanic, and even really far-fetched community DLCs for total conversion as what actually is Skybliven project that I will showcase you briefly later on. So for that, actually, we can tell that this is on the one classification. The other is for the game itself, how it behaves and how it interacts with the UGC community. And here, obviously, you can just split it in two levels. One, I would say, side is for the community to ship tools that are harder to use but less constrained, and that's an easy path for the developers. Obviously, the most easy approach is just when community reverse engineers your game and provides community mod support. That's what actually was done for GTA 5. Then there are options with partial support from developer, shipping the repackaged dev tools, as the case of Tropico 6, for example, or just purely external tools or in-game editors that actually will be taking a closer look later on for the games that we selected. And those are the easier to use and but more constrained, can be more, I would say, granularly scoped for the game options. So now that you know actually those scales, it's good to put them on one chart and to determine which would be really fitting well your game. So obviously there are games of different sizes, different genres, but that will be covered also later on. Let's just talk here about the size of the game. So from indie to double or triple A's plus even, and the approach for the community that you've seen on the earlier slides for the tooling to be there easy for in terms of the UX UI or just overall feeling for the players, or hard, requiring a lot of additional knowledge or specific I would say approach and dexterity to just take a part on it. So practically for the majority of the developers, as we inquired, as we talked a little bit earlier on, but we gathered a lot of data about that actually, is that there is like an specific point for your game. So let's say that your game is really small in size or just in the middle of that chart, then you actually need something that will appeal to the majority of the players, because if you just ship some really crude tools or just will wait for the players to revenge engineer your game, that won't happen because the game itself, it's not a next GTA 5, let's say, or next Bethesda hit. But if your game is really big enough, then you practically whatever you will do will be good enough, and that will just only make the game more popular and, in terms of the UX UI, more approachable for the broader community of potential modders, potential creators on your game. So do not go and do not follow them in the pit of despair, because that means that the tooling will be too difficult, or the approach that you actually selected will be unfeasible for the players. Just go for the approach that is a right fit for your game. So let me just guide you through some really popular mods that will be a great example for us to study later on. Let's start with the bigger ones, with the most known and also most, let's say, popular ones. Those are called total conversions, and obviously they are just recreating the game in another game. A fine example of such kind of a mod is, for example, Enderal, the Shard of Order, made by the team from Germany, and that actually created a whole new world, whole new story with new assets, new items, new mechanics in the game, Bethesda game Skyrim. The other example is obviously Skyblivion project, but it's just so well known that you can just write it up in YouTube and it will pop up because they are really constantly updating it right now to be released later on in 2025. Then we will have an aspect of the community DLCs. So also big in scope mods, maybe not total conversion, not just introducing whole new world, but let's say a new quest line with some new mechanics. And a fine example is A Night to Remember for The Witcher 3, made by CD Projekt. And then we are just sliding to those requiring less work, but also really interesting or enriching game in some ways. For example, Traffic Manager mod for City Skylines that add another dimension, another way to manage really complex roads and intersections for the game. So that's also one fine example. Obviously, there are a lot of map mods for practically every game that can take a benefit out of it. For StarCraft, the second one, for example, Realcraft map that created a whole new genre of the play, not to mention just the evolution of the MOBA games that actually come from earlier RTSs. So it's just something that might trigger even a new event of creating a new game genre. And it starts just with a simple map mod, which was also, by the way, a case with the Counter-Strike and the early years of it. Then there are content mods, way more simpler, just let's say adding an simple, maybe not so simple, but just an additional asset with some maybe less complex options. For example, here for Tropico 6, someone added a video game factory that contributes to your country GDP by producing video games. So it's I'd say very close topic to that. And on the, I would say, total opposite from the total conversions, we do have quality of life and tweaks for the game. As I said, for example, for Starfield, and a nice interface mod that enables you to just determine the parameters in terms of the graphic settings that would be, for example, optimizing the game. That's just another way of community maintenance that, for example, could be in some cases even handled better than done officially by the developers itself. Okay, so we know what's in which scope and for which game can be created in which way, actually, but let's cover the support architecture. So let's cover the ways that developers, the studios, can implement those features inside of the games. So we are starting with the first more technically requiring approach from the gamers, from the communities, but actually requiring no additional work from the developer side itself. So it's just as simple as that, as it is recreating, reconstructing maybe even the game's implementation, the game source code without an actual access to game sources, because obviously who would have an access to game sources then other than the devs, in some cases publishers. So actually the mods that are created using this way, this approach, are created entirely without the developer support. That's an example of GTA 5 that was shipped and actually even right now is without any official mod support. Starfield, they are unable to ship any editor that it took really a good pride for the earlier Bethesda games, for example, for Skyrim, that triggered just a huge boom of creativity for the players. But for Starfield, nothing exists so far. For Minecraft, for example, also really similar case, another language here, Java, but the players actually really took it off and created even and servers that are gathering thousands of people at once to just provide them totally different additional modes of play to the original game. That's just a survival game. So Regarding that approach, the goal actually not from the developer but from the communities, from the creator side, is just to recreate the source code in the I would say scope that will allow to utilize, to get into, and to modify useful game data structures that developer put in the game itself, and to uncover the entry points that will be enabling players just to modify the current game state or achieve desired game state, let's say. That sounds a little bit like cheating, like modifying, because also really similar matters or approaches are used for producing the trainers and the cheat engines for the games. But this is also an approach if you don't really have anything more on that to create an API for mods to interface with the base game. So in the case that the tooling is non-existent, there is still a better option than nothing or not doing a single, I would say, interface with the game. So here is an example of the purely development environment in Visual Studio. Simple script that utilizes GTA 5 script hook that really does just that, that it maps the data structures and uncovers the entry points within the GTA 5 for the modders to utilize and to create, for example, custom speedometer that you can see here. It's just, I would say, a few hundreds of lines of code just to provide that functionality because there is no official support and it requires you a decent programming or game development expertise to just create something additional for the game. Is it worth it for triple A's and quadruple A's even? Yes. We can just summarize it in the that evaluation, that kind of evaluation that the what good it does is actually that the community, for the developer actually standpoint, the community does all the work and there are no limitation of scope because community just like an open box cracks your game and then it pulls everything that is useful and whatever is then open then is just open, maybe even open sourced. Obviously, it is a slow takeoff for the communities to start doing something. For example, right now, the case of Manor Lords, still no official mod support, and whatever will be done in terms of the unofficial mod support. So that way will take probably weeks, if not months here. Community to that approach is really skilled people, even I would say past game developers to create something for that specific game, which is not always a case for every game. And there are multitude of compatibility and reliability issues connected with the security, connected with the upgrades of the core game code and the upgrades of the mods that are usually disjointed at this point. But yeah, for the developer standpoint, also the ugly side of that, if some mods become really popular, like a few, let's say for The Sims 4, people will still blame you for crashes of those mods, even if that's entirely not your code, that's something made by community. So it's just very easy to get hit by association. And not to mention the QA with such kind of a mods, because that is another level of issue, I would say. So let's go to the another more simple approach for the community, but a little bit troubling for the developer side. So actually, the development tools that are repackaged and provided to the community is just a cut down version of the original game source project using the same tools that were used to create the games, or optimize or cut down version of the Unreal Editor, for example, or just an internal tooling for the game that was used in case of the proprietary engines. This is kind of like compromise between developer effort and player experience. Example games with that approach: Dying Light 2, Tropico 6. Tropico 6 used the repurposed Unreal editor, Dying Light proprietary Technoland editor for making new maps. You can see the interface here, and you can easily guess that it's a really good approach if someone has an upfront knowledge in terms of the game design or just moving around in the Unreal Editor. Still really unapproachable in terms of the amateur creators or modders that are not used to some quirks in those environments. Like, for example, that one change with lightning can actually crash the whole game, and you will be just spending another few hours just to get to know what it's all about. Then Dying Light 2, another repurposed editor. This is a kind of an example of map editing in that tooling. Same case that with the Tropical 6 actually. So the evaluation on our side of this approach, obviously it's much less labor inducing than a version of the modding support with the reverse engineering on the community side, obviously. For the developers, it's a little bit of work, but usually not like providing some kind of external tooling or doing an in-game support. I will cover that later on. And usually it hits really well game dev professionals and really advanced hobbyists, just to point it out here. So yeah, the bad side is that it's actually only for technically minded people, and the full extent of the capabilities of such kind of an editor for your game will be used only within that 1% of your community. So the amount of the content, if your game is not a quadruple A, might be still really not satisfying for you, probably. That doesn't entirely prevent any compatibility or reliability issues, not to mention security issues or just simple troubleshooting of the bugs for the mods. And additional risk, it shares part of the project sources that might just go wild at some point. But that's just I would say, additional risk to that approach that will probably compromising to get it done. And yeah, this editor support is also an additional tool that you need to maintain and provide patches. So it's another overhead for you as a studio. And it creates additional technical depth in terms of backwards compatibility or just the sole game updates. So just to note that. Then we do have an approach actually, I would say, consuming the most time and resources on the developer sides, dedicated external modding tools. Those are the tools, the tooling for the community that are custom built. Those are not requiring and actually using any input from the community to provide the tools. But they are not also using a general purpose or just a little bit optimized or cut down editor for the game. This is exactly the approach when you are building additional program or additional game, just a new original game and its release and its source code, to provide really advanced tooling for the communities to use it on your game. So example games that are utilizing such kind of an editor are, for example, Euro Truck Simulator 2, StarCraft 2, Age of Empires, the last one, 4, and the Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim, and all other Bethesda games for that case. Let me guide you through some examples, but first let's just dive more deeper into the approach that enables developer to provide such kind of a tooling. Either way, to interface with the base game and with the external tooling as an external app, they will need to provide the modding API for the game itself to just allow the flexibility to evolve without game-breaking updates, issues, and more other edge cases. So with that, there is an additional overhead of work that you need to cover the endpoints and data structures that you would want to allow to expose to the players for the user-generated content or for the modding purposes for the game. So you need actually to invent and provide for the game new interchange formats, definitions for maps, moddable assets in terms of the even 3D models, 2D assets, embedded scripting languages, sometimes even invent a new language like Epic did with Verse for UEFN. So it's I would say, very good example of how can it quickly even spin off of just from just a modding support projects up to some really big, really advanced project. StarCraft 2 example, Galaxy Editor, really complex one, but allows you to create new game modes, new games inside of the StarCraft. So there's not only a case about map editing, but a case of just providing a tooling that is so complex, yet it enables the modders to create and spin off even new game genres out of that. Skyrim, the creation kit, my own example, a custom house modification that adds as just a simple shack that you can live on and go for a fishing, for example. As you may see on this editor, it's also requiring no less than at least a little bit of game development experience, or just getting to know how to move in the development tools, or even an advanced creation tools. Yet it enables you to create another game inside of that game. In terms of the quest and dialogue editors, for example, you do have it really well covered. Scripting language, there is an additional one called Papyrus that was implemented for the editor as a separate tooling as well. For Eurotrack Simulator, for example, editing traffic rules for artificial intelligence for the other traffic on the roads, you do have another editor, another mode of that enables you to create those things. And for example, editing item properties, let's say a payload, a cargo properties, this is an interface of that editor. So I would say really great in terms of the availabilities, really great in terms of the just the sheer scope here. But in terms of the actual usefulness, it reminds me about late 90s accounting software, actually, that I look really closely into it. Okay, so when we know that, actually, we can move forward. Let's just summarize the approach with the dedicated external modding tools. So the good side is actually that it's really specialized and giving you the most possible options to modify just a specific game, and not that just a specific game. It's more reliable than exposing an original game engine editor or just the pure Unreal Engine with an unlimited capabilities. And the modding API that you are providing for the players, for the communities, are great for clean maintenance and not actually broadening the issue with the technical depth. The bad side is obviously it requires a lot of extra work. It's an additional project requiring an additional, sometimes even huge team, as it's in the case for the Age of Empires or Bethesda games. It actually consists of non-standard development workflows that are reserved for the tooling, for the software, and not for the game itself, because it's another type of the solution that you're providing for the game. And for the players, actually, they are taken out of the experience that they have inside of the game. Then the iteration is still slow. It's just the same amount if, let's say, to compare if the community of your game is not so big, then providing that tooling might be just a big overkill because just still the 1% would be able to create something meaningful in it. Then the developing a game based on a not yet stabilized format that you need to invent or sometimes reinvent the wheel again can be a real nightmare for the communities and so the creators and the developers itself. And you will get probably a lot of performance issues that needs to be solved and can be solved with some universal standard that you might put on that. Let's cover the last approach, more, say, feasible and, for example, for the communities, on the community side, really well fitting in terms of the UX and UI. So creating actually a way for the game editors to be really approachable and appealing for the gamers itself. That's an example, that's a way of implementing so that approach for the studios to provide an in-game modding editors. So that's just a dedicated tooling or toolkit, but not provided as an external software or external program. That's kind of the same. But that is a tooling that is made as another mode of play within the game. So, like having many options to load a new game, then just start a new game, load an existing one or load some saves, and then there's an editor option that can be a map editor, can be an item editor, character editor, even sometimes a logic editor. But the most important part in it is actually that it showcases to the players, to the creators, that making mods can be just as fun as playing the game, and it really broadens the appeal and allows you to get more from the community, even if it's small or smaller in size. That's the approach used in earlier versions of Age of Empires, in Roller Coaster Tycoons, in Postal Brain Damaged that we introduced with Redicode, and with recent indie games such as Circle of Kirsoven, for example. Just the approach that we showcased earlier on for the, let's call it traditional for the sake of this comparison, let's say it's a little bit of an overkill for that, because it will require a lot of reinventing the wheel by the developer itself to provide such kind of an API in a traditional way. But actually, what is really recommended to tackle when building such kind of a solution for in-game edition or some kind of an editor option inside of the game is just this architecture that we created when introducing the ready code to the market. We are calling it modding orchestration, and that's just an enable for the game development studios to include in their project something called mod orchestration library that actually takes all of the care of the built-in content versus mod content, logic defaults versus mod logic. So all compatibility issues, all security issues, all actually format issues, they are kind of solved in that approach because it's well standardized. And if we can take it as an example, for example, if we can take it as an example, let's say the Photon or other multiplayer standards embedded, let's say, in Unity, are enabling studios to really facilitate and to make that process simpler of providing a multiplayer features to be customizable and deployed inside of the game. This is the same approach that will enable you to achieve really similar results, but with the UGC tooling. So would be happy to give you more details about that. And the modding or orchestration actually gives you a bunch of nice features for the game itself. For sure, and first and major point is detecting the conflicts between different mods, and that triggers a whole new level of player experience that is unable to achieve with external tooling or any other system, or requiring a lot of work on that, additional work, let's state it. Then it allows you to actually add a modding support really at a late stage of a development of the game, post-launch or post-maintenance. In that way, you can add an option to create custom mods for a game that was popular some times ago. In your plans, you are shipping new DLCs or just finishing with that, and you are just wondering what to do next with the game. So with that approach, you can provide something like that because it's deployable as an external library, external platform to your game. You can maintain standard game engine workflows, so it's not an overhead for you to do things differently in the game or just when updating the game. Obviously, it limits the performance issues. For example, asset loading in scripting, because it's been reworked and taken care of as a standardized approach. Yeah, gives you an ability and even a flexibility in evolving the base game without breaking mods and crashes due to the game updates itself. And with that, actual players are able really quickly to switch between the editing and playing modes, so you can achieve something in the other means of development known as a hot reloading for the mods. Really, I would say valuable for the modders because if someone remembers the early days, let's say for the Skyrim creation kit tooling, when you needed actually to save a mod, load the game, and if something crashed, actually you need to restart the game again and provide a patch to the mod and just look what's happened. Obviously, you can imagine that restarting the game for the game developers, it's something really understandable, but for the players, it's just frustrating, and you do want to avoid that. Then the Age of Empires, the second one, here on a prime example of such kind of an approach, in-game map editor with really nice and vast features, yet very UX and UI friendly for the majority of the players. Same as Roller Coaster Tycoon 3. Postal Brain Damage, here the approach with the mod orchestration, our implementation from some time ago. There is even a tutorial for beginners that you can apply for the modders, for the communities, just to the editing tools, just to be more approachable to them. And just to sum it up, because we are nearing the end of the time and we are summarizing the whole topic soon again, it's really easiest to use way to get the modding support tools, get the editors to the widest audience as it's possible. It enables you to give a stable and secure mods and provide the support for years and years on actually. It enables you to just put it as an external library, just as an, let's say, an extension to your game without requiring you to rework some standards or just this is just less work than the alternative approaches that we covered on earlier on. Still, you need to configure it. Still, you need to provide a substantial work. And obviously, it will be less powerful than a full game engine editor, but it's really well for the game that actually won't benefit fully from the hacking the sources or just, possibility of adding modders a way to edit just the tiniest screw inside of their cars, for example. So the only ugly side that we are finding in that approach that the game would be the tooling would be the subject to the same QA standards as you have for the rest of the game, which obviously is a good thing because you won't ship anything that would be frustrating or bugged for the players, but it will be another overhead for you as a studio. So let's come to the conclusion and the final thoughts about that. Don't be like this. It's a case of the creation kit in that example that, for example, that if you are launching an editor, the creation kit, you will get on the tutorial. Actually, if you don't do anything, don't read the tutorial, you will get lots of warnings. You need to delve deeper into the tutorial, and actually there is an legit recommendation that the loading will take some time, even on a really, I would say, high-spec computers. But if you get a warning, then just click yes to all, and yeah, it will work. If you would work with audio, you need to switch some configuration option in the text file to 0. And that will stop 99% of the crashes in the creation kit. The actual author that found that bug just told me that don't ask me why. I don't even care. It's beautiful and it works. So if we'll provide a tooling that does that to the players, don't expect that it will be a huge either community upheaval or even a reach from that, especially if your game is not a quadruple or triple A. Be like this, rather provide an easy to use intuitive tools that will enable to reach even 20, 30 or 40% of your communities to create maps, to create assets, to share them on mod hosting platforms such as CurseForge, Mod.io, or Steam Workshop. Just do that. So ultimately, just to summarize everything up, plan the mod support for the size of your community. Don't overkill your game with too complicated for you or for the players tooling, and just provide the tooling that will suit your game the best. Obviously, you can make the scale up and down with the approaches that will require more work on your site or more configuration on your site, as with the in-game editors or just a purely external editors. But always there will be a trade-off between percentage of the people that will actually not surrender during trying to create something meaningful for your game, and those that will do that. And those mods will be, for example, next Skywinds, next Enderals, or a next even a new game genre like MOBA, or even a new game like Counter-Strike. So we know that there are definitely multiple ways to define mods. We compared the meanings and the approaches from hacking the game, so from the reverse engineering up to the in-game editors. Modding can be added, which is also a very important point from that presentation, at later stage of the game, which is a little bit of change of paradigm that most of developers have, that it needs to be shipped from the early stages when the game is still under the development, under design sometimes. No, it does not. At least when you have a clear way to access the data and the game state, that's just an enabler for you to provide or do it with a library such as Redicode and external mod support and official mod support, obviously. Yeah. If you do it right, it will, not only it can, but it will keep your game alive for a long time. Just looking at the examples from the horror games up to the RPGs, RTSs, and other examples, not always triple, quadruple A's, but really having a really nice community of the modders, of the creators that are doing really meaningful stuff, or sometimes even recreating other game modes, or providing just more ways to achieve fun, or just play the game. So that is all. I would say that is a key takeaway from that. Do it carefully, plan it ahead, and choose a most proper approach for your game, for your size, and for your genre. Would be happy to answer more of the question that we'll have. For now, thank you for your attention. More about us as Unready Code, our approach, our orchestration library, and the platform you can find during any time practically using this QR code that we have here. Extremely grateful to be here to take a part of the Nordic conference. See you soon on the event or on the other events. Bye. Take care.